Cowboys got a verified victory over the Chicago Bears yesterday, 49-29. And while, yes, the offense was spectacular, 42 points on offense, you got a defensive score. One of the things that we continue to talk about is this run defense. Is there still something, what concerns you most about the fact that Chicago was still able to rack up over 240 yards on the ground yesterday?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because they were never in a point where they were in control of the game, Chicago anyways, because Dallas got off to such a great start. And I think if it would have been reversed, you would have felt a lot worse about the way that the Bears ran the football because most teams will abandon the run to go throw the football a little bit more. Well, they did the opposite. They came out throwing. They tried to test Dallas in the secondary. Really, Dallas defensively played quite well in keeping things underneath for Justin Fields in the passing offense, but then they abandoned the pass to run the football. And so it was kind of a reverse thought process, and they're toting the rock, and they're down by 20 points. It was a very odd way to kind of gauge where your run defense is. I think it is a concern, and if you were to just put this game in a vacuum, I think you can maybe put it aside. But that's the thing, is it's not. With the entire context of how up and down the run defense has been this year and how many times they have been gashed for big yards on the ground, I think it has to be a concern because 240 yards and nearly 6 yards per pop is not going to get the job done when you aren't getting off to a great start and when you aren't playing teams that on paper you're head and shoulders more talented than. So I think it is a concern, and I think it starts with really gap assignment. When you go back and you look at the film, there's times when Jonathan Hankins really helped you out. I thought he played well yesterday in his Cowboys debut. There's times when DeMarcus Lawrence is pushing guys aside and he's muddying things up. I thought Quentin Bohanna had a couple snaps, but there are so many inconsistencies on guys being in the wrong gap and spinning out of tackles and getting taken out of the play because they're either able to be reached quickly or they're getting to the second level. The opponents are getting to the second level and blocking guys and really creating those lanes. So I don't know. It's really tough to put your finger on it on where it starts, but I think if you start with gap discipline, I think that could help out a ton.
You know, I like what you're saying because in the playoffs last year, San Francisco gashed them. Debo Samuels went wild. He ran wild on not only Cowboys, but the Green Bay Packers. He's just running up everybody. Now, he's hurt right now, but at the same time, I was like, okay, in a way, I was expecting the Bears to run consistently because they're the number one running team in the NFL. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I also realized who's the one team that everybody knows is the best team in the league right now. That would be Philadelphia, and they run the ball too.
You're exactly right. Because if you're looking at this game as a Cowboys fan and you're saying, oh, no, the Bears ran for 240 against our defense, no, that shouldn't necessarily be the concern. It's, oh, no, that's not the only time Dallas has looked bad against the run. Exactly. That's where the concern should really be because it's compounded from not only the playoff game but into the season. I mean, Philadelphia ran all over you. Even Detroit had some plays where they ran really well. They had to abandon the run to throw the football because they were down late in that ball game, but they ran the ball efficiently early on without DeAndre Swift. So there's so many layers to the fact that this run defense has been poor, but also your pass rush has been so good. Your secondary has played so solid all the way throughout the season that you've been able to get away with it. But when you reach a team like Philadelphia, like San Francisco, and then further down the road, when you see some of these other teams like Minnesota's been running the ball really well.
That's right.
You see them in 3 weeks. You have to be better as a defense or else you're going to put your offense in a really tough situation.
Kyle Youmans of DallasCowboys.com joining us right here on the Get Right with Reggie KG on 105 through the Fan, of course, host of Talking Cowboys, which you can hear and see every day on DallasCowboys.com. When you look at this offense scoring 42 points in the conversation around Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, if Kyle Youmans is coaching his football team, what does he do with Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard at the running back position?
I think you do exactly what you have been doing with both of those guys, and maybe a little bit more for Tony Pollard. I don't think they've
nothing wrong with that.
I don't think they've purposefully taken snaps away from Tony Pollard just so that way Zeke gets his fill. I don't think that's been the case throughout the season. It's just based on the game plan going back and forth. But if you want to give Tony Pollard more touches, I mean, he's certainly earned that. Yesterday showed that again, that he deserves to be a featured weapon, and I think he has been. He owns the top 4 longest plays on the Cowboys offense all season long, or at least he did up until I think last week. So he has been a featured piece. Keep on featuring him. But there's no such thing, or it doesn't have to be a thing where it's one or the other. It can be both of those guys getting touches because they're both good at what they do. There were times yesterday, despite his 130 yards and his 3 touchdowns, that Tony Pollard struggled in pass protection. That's one thing that Zeke does exceptionally well. Mm-hmm. There were other times whenever Zeke might have been able to fall forward for a couple extra yards or maybe break a tackle or two when running football. Where on the goal line, short yardage situations, things of that sort where maybe it's more efficient with Zeke in there. Just use those guys effectively, and I think they've done that throughout the year because right now you have a 1-2 punch that teams would be jealous of around the league because you are able to use both of those guys, and both of those guys are number 1 backs. It's not a 1-2 punch anymore. It's more of a 1A, 1B.
And you know what else? The fact that they're running so well together and the fact that the running game is running well, it's like it opens up the passing attack. There's some real complementary football going on. Can you talk about Dak's game yesterday and what he and CeeDee Lamb were able to do with those wide receivers and tight ends?
Yeah, I think the tight ends, too, you definitely need to be thrown into that regard. I mean, there was one series where, for the majority of it, it was the second or third series of the ball game where they had 3 tight ends. They had Hendershot, Schultz, and Ferguson on the field for 4 or 5 straight snaps. And then in the backfield, it wasn't Zeke, of course. It wasn't Tony Pollard even in the midst of that big game. It was CeeDee Lamb in the backfield. And they used that a couple different times just as new wrinkles because they have run the football so well and because it has opened things up on the offense. And of course, Dak Prescott really opens up the entire playbook. They're able to do these different things and mix and match. I thought Dak yesterday was solid. And a lot of people will get on to him for the interception right before the half. I think that was, when you go back and you look at it on the All-22, that was a poor route run by CeeDee Lamb. He rounded his route. He kind of hesitated. He took a little bit of a hesitation right at the top of his route. If he runs that hard and he runs that sharp the way that I'm sure he has 400 times previously, Dak threw that ball on the money because CeeDee was only 1 step behind. If he had a step, he would have cross-faced with the safety, made the catch, and it might have been not only a huge gain, it could have gone for 6 because there was nobody else in front of CeeDee Lamb and between him and the end zone because that safety crashed down the way that he did. So you were that close to making a big play. Unfortunately, it didn't go your way. CeeDee Lamb didn't run the route the right way. But I think Dak Prescott has shown already through his first 2 games that he can certainly throw you back into a football game if you need it, but they haven't needed it because he's thrown so well and been so efficient in the early parts of these games, and he only has 6 incompletions in both of those contests. So he's been doing it from an efficient standpoint, and they haven't needed him to do too much. That's a huge key for the Cowboys moving forward.
Kyle, before I get you out of here, I wanted to ask you, how would you grade the first half of this season now that we are at the halfway point
Good question.
For this Cowboys team? How would you grade the first half of this season for them?
You know, and I was thinking about this, maybe not from a grade standpoint, but just overall. When you were given the schedule for 2022, and everybody does it. Everybody does it. Win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. You go all the way down. You say which ones are wins, which ones are losses. If you would have looked at it playing Cincinnati, playing Los Angeles, playing a couple games on the road early on that are pretty tough, but you would think, hey, maybe, of course, Tampa Bay at the beginning too, maybe they're 5-3 going into the bye week. You feel really good at 5-3. They may be 4-4. They're 6-2, and I think that's a huge credit to what Mike McCarthy, this coaching staff, and especially after week 1 when the sky was falling in Dallas, the way that they have righted the ship. They did so behind a backup quarterback, and then they've still gotten to the bye week at 6-2. I'm not going to give it an A+ because they're not undefeated. They're not in first place, but I'll give it a solid A because they have overcome adversity. They've worked through some massive injuries at different points throughout the season, and they have worked their way to a 6-2 record where they are definitely in playoff position. They're certainly one of the true contenders in the NFC right now because that conference outside of the Eagles is wide open from this point moving forward. I think you'd have to give it an A, and anything less than that I think would be a little underwhelming for sure.